In fact, you can just leave your microphones on, in all honesty. Just don't say anything you don't want recorded.
There might be an issue with press.
Oh, I see. Oh, because your sound is on. You gotta shut, your sound up on your computer. Okay. All right. Well, do remember to turn on your microphones because we are recording it. There's been a fair amount of interest in this topic and we want to promote as much input and feedback as we possibly can. So we'll probably even purposely throw this one out on social media and let people comment, which is always a bit interesting. Yeah, exactly. Okay, sorry. And
Bob Cook, Town of Red Cedar Chair, lifelong resident in the town of Red Cedar. See what we can do.
Rob McDougall, community member, interested in housing issues.
See if I can get this figured out.
yeah.
I'm not exactly tech savvy. Steve Yan, Executive Director of Momentum West. We're the regional economic development organization serving 10 counties in this part of the state of Wisconsin. I'm on this committee because Momentum West is just starting to delve into housing development in smaller rural communities, but more so because I've lived in or outside of Menominee since 1996. So I have a passion for how things are moving forward here. Kind of breaking the organization's rules because the board typically doesn't like me to get involved in county specific issues, more regional issues. But I'm here under the guise of my LLC, we'll say, so I can get away with it.
I'm Tom Quinn. I'm on the Dunn County Board and a chair of the Planning, Resource and Development Committee.
Morning, everyone. I'm Diane Morehouse. I'm also on the county board. I'm the chair of the Health and Human Services Board. And I guess sort of obnoxiously with Tom and Chris as well, have been pushing this housing study feels like rolling it up a hill for a long time. So I'm happy to be here.
Good morning, I'm Paula Winter and I'm the Director of the Human Services Department here. I've been here for a year and I took over for Chris, and the Human Service Department was responsible for writing the CDBG grant that supported the study. And so we were part of that and have continued to be.
And I know we don't have microphones to our back, but since we have people that have made an effort to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning and are interested in this topic, I'll just have you guys introduce yourself so the group knows who's here, and we may solicit your input at whatever point in time.
I'm Andrew. I'm the board supervisor. John Roseman, board supervisor. Neighbors Committee. And I'm also on the Neighbors Committee, but I'm also interested in the housing situation as well.
Christina Brunn, I'm the executive officer for the Chippewa Valley Homeowners Association, and we serve 6 counties here in western Wisconsin, including Dunn County, and actually housing and the challenges that our developers and builders face and trying to get more housing, looking at how do we do housing in Dunn County has been a topic that we have brought up, and it's funny that it coincided right at the same time the housing sector.
And Eric, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Eric Atkinson and I'm the city administrator for the city of Menominee. Thank you for holding this meeting and task force.
Yeah. Do you know everybody, Eric, here at the table?
I know most of the folks here at the table.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure. Oh, anybody that you don't know. Do you not know Ann?
I don't think so. Hi, nice to meet you.
She's Ann Woodard-Check is our zoning and planning.
Oh, wonderful.
Person.
Pleasure.
Nice to meet you. I've been wanting to.
All right. Well, very good. And I apologize for being late.
All right, and then we have you spoke with Christina or the Chippewa Valley Builders, and then we have Corley Witzel and Sean Breslin and Andrew Hagan, who are all county board members interested in this topic.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. So Diane, do you want to do a little summary? I know this is probably redundant for literally everyone who's here, but I think it's good to kind of lay the same backdrop as to how we've gotten to this point.
Okay, and fill in. So, Lord, I can't remember how long ago it was. The the Dunn County Health Department, Mayo Health Systems, University of Wisconsin Stout, and a number of other organizations a number of years ago did a very substantial countywide needs assessment, identifying essentially 5 areas of need in the county. Among them was housing, the access to safe, affordable, appropriate housing. Out of that process were formed action teams, health done right action teams, all of which, interestingly enough, have been meeting regularly for all that time. And is it
I think it's 5, I think
5
it's the 4th
years?
year, 2019.
There
So
was this kind of little interruption called a pandemic, which sort of extended the process. But the housing action team has been comprised of 30 or more people representing a wide variety of interests in housing, ranging from homelessness to transitional housing, home builders, landlords, property managers, all of whom have an interest in housing. And the group spent quite a lot of time sort of identifying needs, and then struggled a little bit with the idea of where would they go next. And what was decided, Tom Quinn and I both serve on the West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission as the representatives from Dunn County. And we became aware that Regional Plan had done a housing study in Barron County that was really extremely well done. They subsequently did another housing study in Polk County, also well done. They're comprehensive and thorough. And so it was suggested to the Housing Action Team, which had resources available from the Community Foundation, which has helped substantially and materially to support this work, to use their grant support from the foundation to support housing planning study. We brought it in-house a little bit and talked about it and said, this sounds like a really good idea, so long as it's focused on things that we can do, not just things that we can identify and then sit on a shelf. And so a lot of time has passed and the housing study has been completed, and it, as you know, it's full of data. It's rich. It's helpful, but the directions that one could take are numerous. I think there are 47 recommendations or something. So when the housing study was shared with the county board last week, we also shared that this group had been identified and were going to be charged with figuring out what kinds of steps can be taken, what can be done reasonably quickly, what needs to be put off. So it's kind of in our hands at this point to look at the data and make recommendations to the county board about moving forward. There was also a subsequent housing study in the city of Menominee and also the village of Boyceville. Is that good enough?
Mm-hmm. The only clarification that I would say is there was sort of like this countywide housing study, and then there was a specific extra focus to the city of Menominee and the village of Boyceville, because they also contributed some extra funding towards a deeper dive into their own specific data and recommendations for their municipalities.
And as Paula said, we did get federal money, community development block grant funds to support the ongoing work.
Any questions about how we got to this point?
Did I see in the study that there was a 2010 plan out of the county to address housing? I thought there was something that I read in there about that.
I'm not sure if this is what you're referring to, but it could be the comprehensive plan that did have a housing element as part of it. I'm not sure. Maybe that was it.
Is there a report on what they did with that or anything, or?
So the comprehensive plan goes from 2010 to 2030. So there isn't really a report on what we do. It's just the plan that kind of shapes the direction that the county is developing.
Thanks.
So this particular group, this work group is a subgroup of the Planning Resources and Development Standing Committee for the county. The standing committees have the ability to recommend creation of a work group or a task force. And they so we will report back regularly to the PRND, as we call it. And this particular composition of this group was a bit handpicked only from the standpoint of I really wanted people who were at the table who were interested in this issue across a broad spectrum and who were interested in kind of digging in and doing some work and actually getting something done, because we at this point in time do have a fairly significant investment in the process of putting together the study. And Paula, when you say the words CBDG, she goes into a bit of a tremor because yeah, those federal grants are just a bear to procure and administer. So yeah, it's
Right.
just trauma. We have to send her to therapy now.
Lost several inches in height.
Yeah. So we've, there's been a fairly significant investment at this point in time. And on the flip side of it, when I came into this role a year ago, another standing committee, the Community Resources and Tourism Committee, was making some decisions about funding for economic development in Dunn County. And they had some questions and they didn't have an immediate way to get them answered. So I offered to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the current climate of economic development in Dunn County. Who were the key players, stakeholders? What were they, kind of what was their focus? What did their funding look like? And that resulted in us pulling together an economic development summit. It was the key stakeholders from around the county that were involved in economic development. So it was the Dunn County Economic Development Corporation, the Greater Menominee Development Corporation, Momentum West, Workforce Resource, or Workforce Development, the Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Menominee, UW Stout, CVTC, the city, and I'm missing someone. But so that group came together on 2 occasions and really did a deep dive into what was the current landscape for economic development, and then what were the priorities for us as a group in Dunn County with relation to economic development. And so 3 things came out of that in terms of action from that summit. And 2 of them are very classic economic development, business retention and expansion, BRE, they call it. The economic development world calls it, and small business development and entrepreneurship, classic economic development focuses. 3rd one, workforce housing, because there is so much chatter in our community about the fact that employers cannot find spots, or people who come to work for employers in Dunn County cannot find spots to live within the county. So as sort of a side, focus, I'm also agreed to take on that side of the economic development world so that we could kind of incorporate just that lens in this discussion. So that's how we got to this point. So we have this behemoth of a economic development study. It does have a lot of data. It is a long study in the sense, but there's actually a lot of pages that are like graphics and things like that. So that does enhance its list, but how long it is. But if you print it on both sides, it looks like this. So you get this much lined up this much paper. But at the end of the study, it really does three things. And honestly, I have been involved in like, administration and planning and whatever for forever. And people talk about goals and strategies and tactics and objectives and whatever. My brain just kind of goes mop, 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 mop. Because I think in spite of us having that language available to us for forever, no one has a great handle on that sort of concept. Maybe Diane, because she did that for a living. She's about the only one. Maybe Eric, because he has to write those silly federal grants as well. But so at the end of it, so it does give us three areas at the end, and they're a little different from each other, but they really meld into the same themes. So there are, starting on page, I didn't write all the pages down, but there are, well, let me just find it because that's the easiest way to do it for those who might be watching us elsewhere. So starting on, it's gonna take me a minute to scroll to get there. Hope no one passes out in the process from dizziness or seizure.
The recommended.
No, the strategy, what's right before strategies? There's something. Yeah, strategies is 102. What's right before that? 95, I think it's right in here. Oh yeah, here. So there are goals on page, no wonder I wrote down page 59 instead of 95. Goodness gracious. There are housing goals. So number one, address Dunn County's existing unmet housing demand, overcrowding, and low vacancy rates. 2, strive to achieve a balanced housing market with opportunities for all households. 3, encourage quality housing choices that meet local demand. 4, strive to provide shelter for all, including those who are not currently in the housing market. And 5, educate, collaborate, and advocate on housing related issues. So goals are really a broad statement about what we're attempting to accomplish, or at least I shouldn't say that so boldly for this group. The goals are the goals out as regional planning laid them out of things that could be accomplished. And then right after that, there is a section, the next section are actually a long list of potential strategies. So strategies are just a way to reach a goal. And so they're kind of in this nice little housing graphic. But then they're broken out below that. So you see reduce development costs, assist with household housing costs, transitional and supportive housing, improve housing quality and conditions, address planning and regulations, education, collaboration, advocacy, and other initiatives. And then lastly, so those don't fit perfectly together, but they're the same themes. And then lastly, we get to the end of the study, and which is, that's still strategies, which is actually a recommended action plan. And that has as well 6 areas, 7 areas, 8 areas, 9 areas, 10 areas. Oh yeah, these are all. So so anyway, it's got a bunch of stuff that we could look at as potential. So what I hoped to do first was just to have a conversation about how do we move forward in terms of identifying perhaps either the lowest hanging fruit, the area of most interest, where we're most likely to be successful, kind of. So I seek the input of you as members to say, are there of these things that we've talked about either in goals or in strategy or in the actual plan? And the plan kind of correlate. So you've got educate, collaborate, and advocate, which we've had, remove regulatory barriers, allocate funding, promote development. I guess those are the 4 areas within the plan. So I open up to the floor to ask you if you have thoughts about how do we start? Eric?
So a couple thoughts that I have that might be, I don't know, so to speak, the low hanging fruit is right now it seems at least people who are approaching the city for development are looking at higher density homes and rentals coming in, which in our city, just to be succinct, for our housing shortages, we need everything is what the study came up. So being picky is not necessarily a great thing at the moment. And if this is what developers are willing to bring in, I think that's something to focus in. Yeah, focus in on. And then in order to do that, I like to look at what our Act 12 has with the recent budget passing. And we're going to be examining our comprehensive plan to see if our zoning can be adjusted in such a manner that we can make it easier for folks to be able to develop in the city. And then the other component too, at least, and I don't know if this is necessarily an issue in the county, but I do think it's an issue for the city, is that trying to make it easier for people who want to develop or build or buy a home or whatnot, where our websites are friendly enough where all of the steps are laid out for someone. If they want to develop, or how to get a permit, what looks to be passing. So if there are permit requirements, that we have visual examples of what that is. So that way people don't encounter unnecessary barriers in being able to do it. Because I think if people are getting frustrated or it's taking extra time, it may look to other communities outside of Dunn County. And I feel that if I was in their position, I'd probably feel that way. And so at least from my perspective, I think one of the easiest things that we can look at is our comprehensive plans, see if our zoning is correct, make sure it aligns with the new Act 12. So that way we can help try to encourage development in our areas. And those are just kind of my quick high thoughts. I have lots of other ones too about other kinds of housing and other sorts of issues. I really feel that folks that are income impacted will benefit from this because it'll allow for some of these higher density units, which can be lower cost than say trying to build a brand new home for $400,000 or $500,000. That's really just out of the realm for most people in our county. But thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Chris?
Yeah.
At this time, I'd like to add a little bit to what Eric had to say there. The town of Red Cedar has given out 16 building permits for driveway permits for this year already, which is like 6 more than normal than in the last 4 years. But our people that want to build in the Red Cedar area face some of the same problems that Eric's talking about. And I have not figured out a way to simplify this yet, because I should be the first contact that they see. They talk to a realtor, they want to buy this piece of property, they need a driveway. So they come to me, any town chairman, and it has jurisdiction. And we look at where the driveway should go, whether or not it requires a culvert, what the line of sight is. Is this a good place to put a culvert in? And then that permit goes to the land office and gets registered and recorded, and the fire number is assigned to that property. Well, many of these homeowners are from out of the area and are not familiar with what has to happen next. The last permit I gave out was in Eagle Point area. And I started to realize how lost he might be as far as where he goes next. And I know that I should have a checklist of, okay, who should he see next? Okay, it's zoning office, building inspector, contractors, electrical hookup, contractors for septic and foundations and all that. It should be like a simplified list. And I don't have that yet. And I've tried to work on it, and I guess I get frustrated with it, and I don't get the right people recorded. But I know like Fred Weber is our building inspector, and I know they got to see him, and I know that they're gonna need electricity. Now Excel or Dunn Electric, depending on where they are. Contractors I can help them out with if they ask me, because we deal with those people all the time. But it would be an assist to these people coming in if we had a checklist of these are the people you need to go and see, and you go see Ann for zoning, you go see land office for questions there on surveyor, a simplified checklist. And I could use a little help with that.
So I don't want to interrupt anyone, but we do have that in the zoning office. I just recently updated it, I think, over the winter. I will say that we have not done a very good job of getting this distributed because Bob should know about it. But I think I'd love to just find out, like, from your perspective and some of these other, the building inspector, maybe meet and take a look at this list and make sure we're covering everything. But we have a pamphlet, it's called a building guide is what we're calling it. And it has all the contact numbers for the clerks, the surveyor, some other things like that. The call before you dig hotline. But I think that could definitely be a tool that we could use to create a better checklist. And I'd love to work with you on that.
I have seen that. I got that from you last fall.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's the most current one.
I'd have to look at it. They're
And
close. They're similar, I'm sure.
there was a little more that I would like to add to it.
Yeah,
Okay,
sounds great.
Let me just take a moment. Luisa Geronimo is a member of our committee. Luisa, do you just want to introduce yourself and?
Do I need this on?
Yep.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late. I had a bunch of stuff to unload on my car and it took longer than I thought it would because I'm working one-handed. My name is Luisa Geronimo. I work for Extension Dunn County. I'm a human development and relationships educator, and I am the co-chair of what we refer to as HAT, which is a committee of the Health Done Right group. And it's the Housing Action Team, despite what it said in the newspaper. It's not an advisory team, it's an action team. We're trying to move things along in the area of housing for our region. And many of the people who serve on that team work directly with people who are struggling to find homes, or who work with employers who are having a hard time getting people to our region to work because they can't find family homes that are appropriate to buy. And so we have been working for a number of years to educate ourselves in the hopes of helping our community move forward or move the needle on the lack of safe and adequate housing for our community. I teach a lot of parenting classes, so I run into a lot of families. And as you know, a community is only as strong as our families can be, because those relationships are what keep people safe and mentally and physically well in our community. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you.
And Luisa, just in the interest of time, is there anyone here at the table that you don't know?
Probably a few, but I'll figure it out on my own. It's fine. You don't need to back up for me. Thank you.
All right. Other thoughts about how we start, where we start, an area that really stands out for you?
I mean, what stuck out to me the most is the, reducing costs and conversations that Momentum West has had with municipalities and counties throughout the region. The one thing that has surfaced is the gap in terms of affordability and cost. And if you're looking at, you can't build a house, a starter house for under $300,000 anymore. And what are ways that we can work with communities, or the county can assist communities in reducing those costs? I had a conversation with Dave Armstrong. He's a state representative, also the director of the Barron County Economic Development Corporation. And he's kind of a case study along those lines in terms of that's their focus. I mean, they know housing is a priority. They know daycare is a priority. They're not focusing at all on business attraction. It's all about that housing development. And he has said repeatedly to me, their biggest barrier is that infrastructure cost, reducing those costs. So to me is, can we identify a way that we can work with communities, rural communities, the city of Menominee, and write down those infrastructure costs, those development costs, take a $300,000 or $350,000 house and suddenly drop those costs down to $300,000. Can we leverage $50,000 somehow via maybe some external funding sources, or open-mindedness of a community to say, we'll approach housing development the same way we approach industrial development, where they're apt in some cases just give away the land. I don't think we should ask for that, but I think there are ways that if we can reduce the cost by 20%, suddenly we're making these homes affordable. And to me, that's the one thing that sticks out. And maybe that's just because that's what Momentum West is focusing on right now. We're looking at developing a housing cooperative. And it's a struggle for us to do that on a regional basis. Maybe that's something this group could look at in terms of, could we do that on a countywide basis, some type of a cooperative? There's a model that was put together in Thief River Falls, Minnesota about 20 years ago. And in those 20 years, I think they've built about 250 houses in about 5 different subdivisions, communities throughout that part of the state of Minnesota. And what they have done is they've been able to put together a collaborative of contractors and subcontractors and material suppliers that will work at a slightly reduced rate. But the key is they've been able to get communities to write down the cost of the land and the infrastructure improvements needed to make those housing developments. You need a willing partner to come to the table and do that. But it just kind of meshes with what Momentum West is trying to do. And it's been a struggle for us to get this co-op up and running. Maybe there's a pilot opportunity for us to somehow put some pieces together here in Dunn County. I mean, we've got one pilot right now we're potentially looking at in Amory. And we've got some external funding sources, and we've got another organization that's working with us. But I mean, that's just one community. Maybe on a county level, we'd have more success. I'm just throwing that out there. It sounds a little bit self-serving because it would kind of further what Momentum West is trying to do, but we've got to do it somewhere and make it work first. So, I mean, let's throw that out there for people to chew on a little bit.
Oh, your microphone's just on. You got something?
Okay. Well, I really appreciate those comments, Steve. And I think the idea, I'm familiar with the Thief River Falls project too, wonderful people. And I think that's the sort of creative collaborations that we need to figure out how to do. I would put on the table maybe the thought that we have a kind of a generational opportunity ahead of us with regard to sources of potential funding and investment and capitalization at federal and state level. And everything from the financing of housing, but I also ask that we not forget the potential for improvement of existing housing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's all this potential money that's going to be available. And I wonder if one of our jobs as a county can be to help figure out how we can make that process accessible to our citizens in an effective, and our businesses in an effective way. And I think the co-op idea, or the idea of an entity like that's something they could do or help do, but that general thrust I think would be important for us.
If I may, I'm gonna piggyback on Tom, because Tom always has the best ideas in the room. But the idea that there are multiple sources of grant support, tax incentives, et cetera, et cetera. So this idea of putting together a comprehensive list of sources of funding that would allow us to move forward, I think would be an easy first step. And then there's this whole notion of educating and collaborating, and it is educating the whole community about the critical nature of these needs. The fact that everyone in the whole community is affected by the housing issues, and so we need landlords and we need tenants and we need developers and we need public officials to sit down and town government to sit down together and figure out how do we make this a priority issue for people in the county? And how do we get people sitting together at the same table? We've talked on PR&D about having the towns and the county come together to talk about the issues of housing. It's the towns, it's the city, it's the sort of all of us. So under this heading of educating and collaborating, I think that would be an easy piece of low hanging fruit to sort of pull together to make people aware and sort of share the momentum. Can I steal that? Going forward. But the list of money, it seems to, and I think it's large. I think there are a lot of sources of funding. It seems to me that would be a really significant first step.
So stepping a bit out of character, but since we have a fairly broad agenda from our guests, anything that you'd like to add to the conversation or thoughts that you have at this point in time about? And I would ask you maybe to grab Polly, yeah, if you want to grab them a mic, just so that we capture their comments.
Sean Breslin, I've been doing, this topic hits personally to me. For the last year and a half, my daughter and grandson had been homeless. We spent a considerable amount of time trying to find housing for them. You know, we looked at buying a house totally outside our price point. So the low income housing, while I like, getting the collaboration and education, the new market grants that are there, maybe looking at their rezoning to get more of the boxable homes or, something that we can actually have for our homeless. My granddaughter was born homeless. And she now lives with us, but it's a serious issue. My son, right now, his family couldn't afford a house in this community. Had he not bought his house 5 years ago, we wouldn't be able to see our other grandchildren. So finding the money and looking at doing zoning changes so we can put up. I was looking at Fox News this week. They had a great article from Minnesota where they changed the zoning laws to allow tiny homes for the elderly so they could come and watch the kids, which now takes care of the elderly housing and childcare. A couple of my constituents, there's single widows and they would like to get out of their houses, but they don't have any place to go. If we had a HOA for the elderly that wasn't a nursing home, just, they're able, they just don't need a 3,000 square foot home. So I think we need to look at starting, I don't know if it's starting at the top and being able to get more single family homes made available. But I know that I looked at that new market group of tax incentive. That looks very difficult to get, but if there's money out there, I'll be more than happy to try to help get it. Thank you.
Thanks. Corley's looking for a microphone.
Thanks.
Okay, so we have a son that's interested in buying probably an acre of our land. He has the stake put in for the driveway, but he's he's been working with the zoning office and I'm not sure where he is with that, but he's trying to buy, yes, he's going to buy an acre, I think is what he's looking at, but he's trying to have monies there. The interest rates keep going up and he says, Mom, I can't afford it with all the interest rates going up. So here against the money issue where we can find some monies with low interest rates to help him to get going with building. His whole purpose is to build there. He's got a house now here in town, but he wants to build out there where he can take care of my husband and I, so we don't have to go in the nursing home. So they can be close by. So, you know, the interest rates, the money issue, kind of like what everybody's been talking about, is where we're at with that too. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a couple different thoughts that I had as conversation has been going on. One of the reasons that, you know, we've been starting to get more of an interest in this area as well is that I hear from our developers, our builders, that Dunn County and Menominee is not development friendly, that it's challenging to build here. There's a lot of barriers. Things are expensive. It's hard to get things done. And so when you talk about it, people cringe, and that's the perception. And to change that perception is going to take some work and some time, and it's going to take effort to look at that. So I think that needs to be part of this as changes are made, the education piece and trying to convince builders that have been opposed to working in this community is going to be important, because we have some great builders in this area, but they cannot build even to the quantity that we're looking at needing to build to here. So that's a big piece of that, and being able to bring their concerns, you know, what's going on, why are they having issues, what are they running into, I think needs to be part of the conversation and looking at what needs to be looked at within the communities. Another piece of it is zoning, looking at more flexibility in zoning and some of in the city as well as in some of the townships and things, looking at maybe more flexibility in terms of how zoning is done to allow more of even small multifamily intermixed with single family. Looking at some of the rehabilitation programs to try to rehab some of the older homes. There's a lot that can be done in terms of looking at how to do that. There's some great articles, some great studies that have come out recently related to zoning and flexibility in zoning that I think could really help drive some of that, and looking at, you know, how do we look at our neighborhoods and what does that look like from a city level, from a county level. You know, there's rural areas that are going to stay rural, but then there's area like Elk Mound, you know, you go through Elk Mound now and there's, you know, a whole section of multifamily that was not there 2 years ago, you know, and that's just come up almost overnight, it feels like. You know, so I was just out at Vino Cappuccino last night. I was like, holy cow, there's even more buildings now than there were. So, you know, and that type of, you know, that type of housing is important, and that community is very much more of a rural community. And so looking at, you know, what does that look like in terms of flexibility with housing? The Act 12, there's money specifically set aside there in WIDA for rural communities. And that's something that there's going to be, there's a certain percentage of that WIDA funds that are going to be earmarked for rural communities, but in order to qualify for those loan programs, the communities have to take efforts to show that they're reducing cost of development. And what does that look like in terms of permit fees, in terms of, you know, helping with infrastructure? What does that look like? So there's a lot of different things that can be done. I mean, this is a great time to be looking at this. It's going to be 2024 before any of those monies really become available. So where are we at in this process? There's just so many things that could be done. And it's an exciting time to kind of look at how do we help move Dunn County forward and get to where we need to get to for housing at all levels, from the low to the high.
If I can jump in, a couple of points that were made. You know, Sean mentioned, you know, if there, your daughter, and are there funds available for her to you know, get into a house, and you know, there are programs for communities to underwrite costs. There's so much going on, but how do people find out about this? I mean, I think that's been a struggle that we've faced, and everybody is facing. Is, you know, you look at the GMDC, the program they have, the $10,000 grants, 0% interest grants for people to relocate to the community. How much of that has been leveraged? I don't think a lot of it has, and there's a pretty significant pool of money there. The Workforce Development Board has a program for individuals that were affected by COVID in terms of housing, child care, you know, upskilling, transportation. But how do you get that information out to the people that need that information? There isn't a conduit of communication anymore that used to exist. Now it's all digital for the most part, and not everybody is fond of digital. So how, I mean, there's not a repository of this information. It sure would be nice if something could be developed and this goes right along the lines of a toolkit for somebody that is looking to build a house. But how do you gather all that information and get that information disseminated to the folks that need it, which typically aren't folks that are sitting around this table or I mean, to me, that's a huge challenge and, you know, there are dollars out there, but you know, how do we find out about those and how do we get them that information, the proper sources, and how do we connect those folks with the people that can actually reach out and help get those funds? So I don't know. It's an education thing, I guess.
Carly?
Some way we can get interest rates down.
So that it's affordable. In getting interest rates down there so that we can, you know, that they can even think about building. That's the thing that it keeps going up. If there's some other way through some program or whatever, I don't know.
Hi, Andrew Hagan here. One thing that keeps, I visualize throughout all talks of housing development is, let's say we, are able to put up, 200 new units within a short time span or so. While those are being developed, what I'm picturing is what, stops, or because we're looking at specific housing for Dunn County residents and affordability. But with these new construction opportunities being built, what would prevent a outside entity from outside the company to come in and scoop up and buy up all these while they're still being developed and then turn around and turn them into rental units at a higher cost or whatnot? Because if we're looking at housing for people, what will make sure that those houses get to those people versus just being another investment opportunity for someone else? That's just my thought.
I can say two things. One, to kind of address that issue, if a development is going in and there's a development agreement in place, there would be an opportunity to have language in there to sort of lock in how that development will be utilized. And then the other part about, and I'm touched by your son trying to build a whole house over on your land. You know, and thinking about trying to keep costs down, one of the things that have been kicking around is partnering with nonprofit organizations such as Habitat for Humanity and seeing if they want to expand their type of operations, where you're talking about, I think maybe it was you that was given ideas about donating land to build on, where communities, whether it's city, townships, what have you, can donate parcels of land, create a partnership with a nonprofit that can buy materials at cost, because I think that material cost is, I mean, labor is obviously very expensive when it comes to building, but those materials have really driven up in price here the last handful of years. And maybe nonprofit organizations like that would be willing to expand beyond their traditional scope of work. And that could help drive prices down too, as a potential option. I'm just kind of thinking of different ways to tackle it. Maybe that's too soon for the group, but I really feel you for trying to find the homes for both of you there. Anyway.
Go ahead, Paul. Oh, sorry. Oh. Let Paula speak and then we'll let you go in.
As from Human Services, the voice of the people that maybe are the most vulnerable in the community. We have amazing programs in Dunn County to help people recover, and they are doing really hard work. And we have successful graduation rates out of our programs. Going into the programs, they have evictions, they have criminal records, they have all the things that bar them from housing. And, you know, I get it when they're going in those programs because they're not in a good place, but coming out, they've healed their work and their recovery, they still cannot get housing. And even if it's available, and I've been watching for the last year in Dunn County for low income housing, and I'm talking like $600 to $900 range for people that are, you know, in that lower income, low medium income. Even if you couldn't find it, I mean, because it's not there. I mean, it's really challenging to get that. These records really impair people from getting housing and living in the community and having those natural supports. And like Sean was saying, having grandparents nearby that can help support them and support their recovery and all of those kinds of things. And so I watch other communities, and there's some grassroots movements of organizations that help people, like do case management for people, or will work with landlords to commit that if they work with them, will the landlords give them an opportunity even with these records? Or is there a second chance program? I don't know if you can expunge records, or I haven't explored any of those kinds of things, but for people who have been very successful and want to move on in their recovery. So I just think that there's some work we could do there to help those individuals as well and families.
Christine had mentioned something a little while ago that I've heard as well, and that is developers, when they're looking at, do I want to build in Pierce County or Dunn County or Chippewa County or Clark County, and they look at Dunn County negatively. I've heard the same thing. I don't know why. I don't know that, but that to me seems to be something. If there's a perception or a reality, I think we need to address that. Otherwise, our success ratio is not going to be very good, with regardless of what we attempt to do. And again, I've heard the same thing. In fact, I heard that comment at the economic development planning retreat from I forget who, but I think it's something we need to look into.
Certainly something that would at least be helpful on the city side. And I don't know if the county feels the same way, but knowing those specifics where, this is what's causing that struggle. So either we can overcome it, make changes that's appropriate in our code. And then also, part of it, maybe some of it is perception too. So even if we are able to change whatever codes or process may be in place, if we know what those perceptions are, we can also then try to tackle that through advertising, marketing, to try to overcome some of that. Because if we've developed that reputation, it's going to take some time to overcome that, even if we're able to get past some of these other barriers like codes, setbacks, all that kind of thing that might be hindering development.
Dan, speak.
I've been trying for a little while, but mostly because everyone keeps me saying the Z word. So I have a few things, I guess. And maybe I should have said this earlier, but in my mind, and I'm probably a little bit biased, but I do think zoning can be a big hindrance for people. Too much regulation can slow things down, not enough can make things get a little wild. One of the things that I had recently brought up with the PR&D committee was accessory dwelling units. And I do feel like this is something that we could get into our zoning ordinance fairly quickly, if people are on board and fully understand it. I've heard of other communities, I think probably larger than here, but one of the things that they offered with these ADUs was to provide like pre-designs. They have blueprints and building plans that are already made for people. So if they're interested in ADUs, it's already there. That cost is already eliminated. And the other part about ADUs that's nice is they can tap into an existing septic system. They can use the infrastructure that's already available, and that greatly reduces the cost. So I do think that's something that we could look at.
Could you just speak to kind of the what is an ADU?
Sure. Sorry, sometimes I get a little caught up in the jargon. So ADUs, for those who don't know, are accessory dwelling units. Picture in your mind, I think someone brought up that they wanted like elderly people to be able to participate in childcare. So this could be something like a small house, even a tiny home built on the same property as, say, a single family home. And that's where grandma can live. Or say, your son who's 21 is just getting out into the workforce and needs a place to stay that's affordable, while still kind of being in touch with the family. I get a lot of phone calls about this in the zoning office. People are very, very interested in this as an option. Sometimes it's even just an apartment above a garage that's separate from the house. That's also considered an accessory dwelling unit. I think that was kind of where I was with that, but I think that's a really quick one that we could address.
Chris?
Yeah.
In regards to what Ann was saying, that brings me back to when I was first married, 1974, working on the farm at home. Needed a place to live, gonna get married. My brother had already done that. He had already rented the only trailer house within about 4 or 5 miles of the place. So I was able to purchase land from my next door neighbor. And because we were farming, we did not want to take field farmland. So I bought an acre of land from the neighbor in the woods. It worked out very well because the woods went right to the corner of an intersection and you couldn't see around the corner. So the town came out, looked at my situation, and I said, this will be improved upon if I put a house in here, because I'll be removing a lot of these trees. Line of sight around that corner will improve. It's not a bad place to put a driveway because it is a slow area because of the 3 roads coming together. And I lived in a trailer house there from 74 to 79. In 1979, I bought a WIC home and I took the trailer house out, lived with my parents on the farmhouse. The place that I was living was centrally located between the 2 farms, which are 1.25 miles apart. So I lived with my parents in the upstairs of the big farmhouse. Contractor came in, we put up the basement and graded the lot area, put in a septic for a 3-bedroom home. The well was already there. Built the house in the winter of 79 and 80. I was financed. Finance rates were way high. I couldn't get a loan in town. I had to go through fleet mortgages. And maybe none of you ever heard of that, but that was not the most popular choice. Interest rate was 17.5%. Now you talk about people here that can't get a loan because the interest rate's too high. What is too high? What are you willing to pay? And I realized that back then, my home did not cost that much. But if you're paying, I borrowed $38,000 to build the house. I already had the well and the septic and the land. But when you're paying 17.5% on that, that's a bite. So this fleet mortgages was going to be a low income housing, which would be supplemented. And they said the idea was you pay on that until at such point housing loans come down and you can transfer to a bank. So that took 10 years. I paid on that for 10 years on my $38,000 mortgage. And because they figured the interest payment wrong over that entire 10-year period, I had to borrow $40,000 from the bank to pay off the $38,000 mortgage from fleet mortgages. Now, do you think that didn't set you back a ways? It's what are you willing to make for a sacrifice? We look at the city of Menominee and you look at the South Broadway area. The answer to the housing problem right after the war was tiny homes. And they're still down there, but most people don't drive that area to see it. There's Quonsets, little single-story houses. I don't know if they have basements or not.
I don't think so.
And they were about as cheap as you could put up. But there is nobody here or their children that will live in that kind of a structure today. Nobody. Trailer houses are even frowned upon by first-time homeowners. If they have any means at all, they're going to put up a house or rent a house or something. It's what we'd like to do here to help with more housing, what we're willing to do, and what we can do. Now, town of Red Cedar is no different than any other town in the outlying area. We don't own any property that we could just donate. It's just not a possibility. We don't own anything. And as far as what we can put up, that's mandated by the state and the county zoning. One home, 1 acre of land. We recently changed it to whether it be a condominium, a duplex, a twin home, has to have 2 acres because we need to have room for expansion for the septic. So we're guided by what the state and the county say we can have for housing per acre. And then you have Neil Cook that comes along and says, our groundwater is going to be contaminated because we got too many septic systems. And his push is to eliminate all septic systems in the towns. That's a great idea, but it is just not possible. And the only way that's gonna be possible is to get help from the state. And I don't see that happening. So the only thing I can see us doing is like south of Highway 12 on 610th Avenue, 610th Street. On 538th Avenue, there is a private development there with about 4 or 5 condos. I think it's owned by who's the pizza guy? Alex's Pizza. Used to be Alex. Anyway, his son owns that. And some of my neighbors live in that, they were on the farm, they live in that area now. That's about the best scenario that I can see happening on the town's behalf is condos, and most homeowners do not want to see condos mixed in with their single family housing. So we do not have any areas designed at this time specifically for duplexes, multifamily or condos. Maybe that's something the town could look into. But because Red Cedar considers itself to be a farm community, we are trying desperately not to allow housing on good farmland. The last development that we put in is on what we call Rifle Range Road. It was the Dan Buckley farm. And that was originally set up, I think, for like 50 some houses. Diane, you know, maybe remember more about it.
Steve lives in that development.
Yeah. But the county bucked us on that pretty hard to get the okay on that. And so I'm feeling a little bit picked at here because we've tried really hard to keep housing in marginal farm areas. And we get the pressure from people that worried about the aquifer. And yet we know we need more houses. So I don't know where to go. And I don't know what residents would do. I don't think there's anybody that would come in and want to have a tiny home for young people because they know they're going to be expanding. We're interested in what we can do, but I don't have an answer at this time, and I'm sure looking for guidance.
So one of the things I'd just like to bring up, and I think you might have mentioned, comprehensive planning. The county is within, we're updating our comprehensive plan, but, it technically ends in 2030. We are looking at let's make a new comprehensive plan. So many things have changed since we originally put that one in place. And that comprehensive plan is the driver for making these changes. And, just going off of something that Bob said, we want to identify these areas that are appropriate for multifamily housing and for more dense housing development. We have the data. We have things that tell us, where are the areas of groundwater recharge that we should be concerned about? Where is the prime farmland? We can look at all of these things and we can help the towns decide, well, this is where we want to see those condos and this is where we want to see, more housing development, maybe some businesses that can come in here, things like that. And I think we have a lot of the tools. It's just implementing them and getting them going. And it's nice to hear you say that, because I think a lot of people do maybe not look so great upon multifamily housing. So it is nice to see that. And one other thing is that, the current zoning of the county and towns under county zoning, it does seem to me like a lot of towns, we're kind of faced with making those decisions in a short amount of time and maybe didn't get a chance to look at some of those things and plan the way they wanted to. So a lot of towns it's general ag zoning. You can build a house there, you can farm, it's a really broad category. Or they went with residential or commercial. We kind of missed things like R2 and R3 where that more dense zoning could occur. And then it's also difficult at this point to rezone those properties because you don't want to do spot zoning. You have people that are coming up against that. So again, I think we come back to the comprehensive plan, we create that driver, we put a lot of these things in there, and we can kind of direct that development better.
I think we looked as far forward as we thought we could because we have no R1 in Red Cedar. We have general ag and we have R2. light commercial and industrial. And but we don't have any new developments going in that are saying, this is R2, we can have condos, we can have a duplex. Lots that are available in some of the residential areas like Timber Valley. The residents do not want to see multifamily in there. And they will petition the town to try to keep that out. There's some stigmatism attached to that. When the residents spend $300,000 to $400,000, which is not uncommon today for a house, they do not want to see an empty lot be turned into a condominium.
If I may, Ann is right. ADUs were on my list, and the whole idea of comprehensive planning. I mean, I think that's where we need to be with input from developers and employers but just, I mean, I'm sure that I have been guilty of putting the brakes on, but it can't, the comprehensive plan development can't go on for a couple of years. This is a pretty critical issue on which we need to move. And we need to be able to demonstrate to developers and to employers that we are taking it seriously and that we are moving forward. We can't just say, yeah, well, we'll have a revised or a new comp plan in 2026, or, I mean, that's just, that isn't gonna cut it. And I'm not staring at you.
Okay. Well, I've not even been here that long, thanks. But I mean, if we were following a normal comprehensive planning, cycle, it wouldn't be for some time now. But what I'm identifying as someone who is pretty new in Dunn County is there are a lot of things that are different. And I think that spurs that comprehensive plan. There are things we can do before we write a comprehensive plan. And I don't understand why the previous update took as long as it did. I have some ideas, but we're making progress. I hope you guys feel that way on the PRND. We'll be talking about it next week. It's kind of exciting for me. I feel like I was given a gift here in that way, that there are some big things that we can do, and as a planner, it's exciting. But I think, let's not get too bound in the comprehensive plan long-term. We're looking a little bit more short-term, I think, right now, at least with this meeting today. So I think zoning, there are a lot of things that we can look at, just small things, fees. Maybe there's some things we don't want to be asking for a permit. I mean, a lot of counties will do things that this is a permitted by right use. We don't need a permit for you, just make sure you're following all the setbacks. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to kind of tackle this. I'd love to hear more about what are the barriers that developers are seeing? I really want to know what these are, and I want to know what the towns think too, why is this? But I want to know what those barriers are, because I feel like we could work toward fixing those fairly quickly, potentially. I've also noted that there's not a lot of subdivisions being put in Dunn County. What is that? Why is that? I know Timber Valley, a lot of people have some negative feelings about that. I've only heard stories, so I'd like to know more there too, but we're going to get another big subdivision, and we want to be able to tackle that in the right way. And we want people to be able to build houses. So something to look at. It's like,
Lisa?
In some of the discussion of low hanging fruit, I would like to bring up that I respect your opinion about people having negative feelings about trailers and trailer parks and manufactured homes, but a WIC home is a manufactured home, correct? That comes sort of in pieces and then you put it together.
It is
right?
definitely manufactured home.
Yeah.
But the reason it didn't bother anybody is because I'm
You got it in
a
a
mile
good
and a half
spot.
apart
Yeah.
from the farms. I'm the only resident in that area. I'm in a wooded area, and I have nothing wrong, no feelings of animosity to anyone in a pre-manufactured home. I'd go back to one now.
Right.
I'd go to a trailer house now.
I just wanted, before I went on, I wanted to make sure I wasn't insulting you because
No.
it has come up several times in the housing action team and also in my work with the Hmong families that I worked with before when I was a 4-H educator, that there's to live in one of our manufactured home communities in Menominee, and there are only a few that are allowed in, those are grandfathered in. that was basically a good experience and people were super happy to be able to get one and to get their family in there. And many of those communities are actually communities, which is something that Paula, recent research shows that one of the top health indicators is how connected you are to your community. So that's a very good thing to have neighbors and to feel a neighborly sense of, helping each other out. So I don't know when the decision came for the city or whether that's also countywide that there's a prohibition against allowing, is there a modern term for this? Mobile home parks. I know there's a new name for it, but my father-in-law lived in one in St. Paul for most of his life. And it was a good experience for him. It made it possible for him to, stay independent up until his death, really, because his neighbors helped him out. I would say whatever that decision was, because I know like people are upset they don't want a condo or they don't want multifamily housing. The not in my backyard thing is definitely going to have to come up for our county. It will come up over and over again. We need to have a counter narrative running about how harmful it is to our entire community to not be able to give people homes. And there's a housing first movement across the whole world where the evidence appears to be very solid that you cannot do good work in the area of getting somebody off narcotics or off meth or out of alcoholism or off the criminal path if they don't have a place to live. So would like to mention that on the low-hanging fruit with additional dwelling units, we ought to at least reconsider as a community whether or not a well-run, nice manufactured home community might be a possibility. We talk subdivisions. This would be a different kind of subdivision. It's a different kind of small home. But it's something that instead of just saying we're not going to look at it, I would ask respectfully if PRND and planning and zoning could at least consider what other communities have done to make that possible. Thank you.
I like the idea of the pre-manufactured housing. And I think there's a stigmatism attached to the name and the idea of a mobile home park or trailer park. Out west, they have that. But they call it a gated community with park models. And
I
was digging for what is the modern term here. So
It's,
hey, there we go.
is there a marketing, angle that can happen with these things? Is there a little more PR we can do?
what needs to happen is it needs to be hooked to city water sewer. Because you're going to concentrate a bunch of these smaller units, basically in a gated community, and you're going to encourage either elderly people, especially widowers, that they don't want to be alone either. Nobody wants to be alone. So if you could start a 10-acre parcel hooked to city water and sewer and put in park models on slabs, anchored down, maybe a carport for one or two cars, I'd go there. I don't want to have to mow the lawn. I live on a bad hillside, and
We might have an option for you here in the next 2 years. Well, we're looking at doing just that.
I know there's going to be some changes along Highway 12 coming. I think we're on the same page.
I believe we are. I'll be excited to see you move into the city.
I can't.
Yeah.
I gotta have it in Red Cedar.
Okay. All right. Well, I gotta try.
Right.
I think I know what you're talking about, Eric, and along those lines, how do you remove some of the stigma associated with some of these developments? Up in Osceola, they're in Polk County, they're developing a lifestyle tiny house community. And it's all about gardening and shared garden equipment and you go and you borrow the tractor and you've got a plot and you've got a pavilion with shared space, but it's a lifestyle tiny house development. That I think is really cool. And that's, you could do that, and they've done a great job eliminating the stigma of these tiny houses. Because a lot of people think a tiny house is a house that somebody buys because they can't afford a big house. No, that's what they want. That's the lifestyle they want. So how do you pull that off here as well? It's a neat model, and the layout they've got up there, the map of it with the houses and where they're situated in the garden space, and it's just cool. It's really cool. But
I actually know a lot of people who have money, who downsized, sold their farm, all their outbuildings, all their animals, their tractors, and live in tiny homes. And what I love is they can clean their tiny home in like half an hour. It's completely spick and span and beautiful woodwork and tile and usable everything. I mean, it's a lot of work when you think about our American lifestyle and all the things we accumulate. To get rid of all of that and move into a tiny home is a process. But like up in Osceola, you're attracting people who have similar interests. You're basically building a community that way. I think they would sell like hotcakes. I know the small home, originally tiny home idea that Mayor Knack had many years ago has brought up lots of discussion, and most people I know are very interested in it and would buy one in a heartbeat. They're just like ready to go. And these aren't necessarily people who can't afford a bigger home. There might be people who are just at a place in their life where they are tired of vacuuming. So.
All right, well, in the interest of time and leaving with something actionable, so I wanted to make two points just that come to mind, and they fit into kind of all of our conversation. But yesterday, the Department of Revenue released equalized value and net new construction numbers. And so our county-wide net new construction number was 1.49%. So basically they take all of the things that were built, subtract all the things that were demolished, and then it gets you this number. So, but Elk Mound's net new construction number was 15+%.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
So, like there's a boat, I mean, okay, Elk Mound I can ride my bike to Elk Mound. It's not that far. We can, we can do what's happening, so that's one thing. The other thing was, the other thing that stood out to me, I think probably the statistic that out of the housing study that stood out to me the most, and I don't have the numbers absolutely exactly, but I've repeated it enough that I'm close, are the new housing starts number. So in the 10-year period from 2020 to 2010, 2000 to 2010, Dunn County had over 1,800 new housing starts. And in the next 10 years, between 2010 and 2020, we had like just over 500. So that's a third of the number of housing starts in the next 10-year period. That's in my mind, kind of a sobering statistic.
And a documented need in the housing study for 2,000 plus additional housing units. I mean, that's a lot.
So a couple of thoughts. I mean, listening to you all speak and took some notes, and Anne's been busy taking notes as well. Sounds like there are at least a narrowing. So I know this is hard to see, and I don't know. There's got to be a way to make it bigger. Somebody who knows these things. Oh, here it is. So there is this recommendation of, and this I mean, I don't know that this is exact, but there's this is a part of the plan to audit and revise zoning and subdivision ordinances to allow diverse housing types and to reduce barriers. But it's actually the action that's next: perform a code audit, talk to developers and builders, and identify barriers to development of housing within the county. And that was sort of a repeated theme, whether it's actually the zoning piece but I think one will lead to the other. So when I think about what's been identified as potential quickly actionable items, that seems like something we would be able to do. The other recurring theme seemed to be some version of a toolkit. So whether it's related to, and maybe there's two parts to it, but whether it's related to sort of the funding piece, or whether it's related to navigating the administrative processes, but some type of a one-stop shop for either a developer or a residential home builder to look at. So those are kind of my takeaways of things that seem to be recurring things. There's 100 ways to start, but there seem to be some consensus around those things. Having Christina here is amazing because she's our conduit to our developer builder community. And so kind of your thoughts, do those resonate as true, true to you as well as kind of two places that we could target to start?
And I would just add sort of bubbling underneath all of those was this theme of creating awareness sort of in the community about the needs that the county and other partners around the table, the city, are moving forward with some of this, communicating with developers, just sort of building a case. I think bubbles up under all of those comments as well.
Very good point.
The other thought that I had on that is it really seems like the county, a lot of what might come out in the like new zoning and some of those pieces are going to take some real advocacy on the part of a body. And it can be educational and that kind of thing to put that out there. But if you're really talking about, kind of Luisa's, thoughts about development or something like that, or the accessory dwelling units, there's going to really require some real advocacy around that. And I'm wondering what level, the county wants to play in that or not play in that, or the city. But it seems like these are, just having been at the county board meeting, there's some quick responses to things, and it's gonna. I'm just wondering what level. The other thing, like Stephen's piece about the cooperatives and those kinds of things is, are there particular areas of advocacy or putting some energy towards that this body or the county wants to do? One of the things I do think is often important is to have some accomplishables that, that are put out there, that people say, oh, something is actually happening. Yeah. And when you're talking about, changing the perceptions, I think part of changing the perceptions is actually having something that happened. So I would suggest, if there, Chris, as you're putting together your lists there, which I think are brilliant pieces, and I think they're deeply important, but to actually see something that takes place, whether that's not just documents and those kinds of things, but actual seeable things that are happening, and it can be targeted. Eric, you were talking about doing some targeting, and I think to do some particular targeting would be a great advantage to doing some things to promote the county again and saying, oh, the county is moving on some things. When I look at Eau Claire and I look at Chippewa Falls and some of the other areas, I see some real tangible things happening, and those build some energy, it seems to me, to move forward. So those are just a couple of my 2 cents.
I love that. And I think there are easy low hanging fruit in that. So like I talked about putting this meeting out on social media. I realize we do lack a uniform news source in the sense, but you try to get things out in whatever way that you can. Yeah, I mean, I think that, there's just, and then get the city and, all of our partners to share as well, that messaging. Eric and I have a long history of collaboration together, and I think together with some other partners like DHS, I was at DHS, but DHS and in our Criminal Justice Collaborating Council, I think we've accomplished some amazing, amazing things over the last decade. I hope I don't throw him under the bus to say this, but when I first met Bob Cook, he said, "You're going to see a lot of me." But I think it's just a great accomplishment to have the town representation sitting here in this group to have these conversations with us. So we have already accomplished some inroads to momentum that I think can just kind of continue to grow. So thoughts about, let's just pick these off kind of one at a time. And so I'll just target them into 3 areas. I'm just going to say toolkit, whatever that means. And then kind of auditing of and talking to the builders, kind of however that looks. And then that sort of advocacy, how do we get the message out that we're doing something? Not even we're just trying to do something, we are doing something because we're here. How do we move forward with those?
I think as far as like we're doing something is to bring in the different shareholders within our, like the county and the city and the builders or Momentum West and work on some kind of a comprehensive advertisement of some sort, and then we can share that out. We've got a collaborative group that's trying to work to address these issues. Here's our 30,000-foot view right now, and then this is what we're driving at, and then we're looking for participation, we're looking for advice, and more things are to come, and then we push those out into increments as we start to develop different plans. So like if you're talking then the toolkit, if we start progressing on the toolkit piece, here we've updated our different websites. This is where you can access everything. If you want to buy a house, do you want to rent a home? Do you want to rent an apartment? Do you want to develop? How do you do this? How do you navigate our government? Because that is complicated.
Let's not forget the landlords, because we get so many complaints from people about the difficulty of dealing with our older housing stock around Stout, for instance.
Yeah.
Lots of students don't have they're young, maybe it's the first place they're renting. They don't even know what their rights are. So it would be nice to hear from the landlords too, if there's things that we can do to make things better for our renters as well.
Lisa, you've got an amazing point, and maybe one of the partners that we're missing at the table would be having Stout here, because Stout does have essentially a toolkit for their students that want to rent. And because they're young adults, it's complicated, and it's complicated for adults. So it may be worth just bringing them to the table, seeing if they can bring in and share some of those resources, and we can build that out, because that's an amazing point. We really didn't capture that.
If I could jump in and add to what Eric said, I think Stouts, absolutely. I think this toolkit has 2 facets. It's the private party, and it's the developer, the contractor. And in regard to the contractor perspective of the toolkit, does anything exist? And this is something that we've talked to Stout about. We've talked to the manufacturing or the Discovery Center about getting an EDA grant to see if we could do some infrastructure mapping. If you go to the county EDOs, a lot of them will tell you we don't need that. We've already got that information, but I beg to differ.
What is that?
Infrastructure mapping, where what we would do is we would map the existing infrastructure, the utilities, how the properties are zoned, so that we can work with developers and communities to identify land that has infrastructure this close to being what it needs to be. What are the costs to finish that infrastructure? Is that something community can underwrite? Are things zoned properly? The original concept was for us to do that, to identify industrial developable sites. But the bottom line right now is you can't bring business and industry to this part of the state of Wisconsin unless you have workforce, and you can't have workforce unless you have housing. So we're spinning back. Maybe we have a conversation with Stout, not from a Momentum West perspective, but from a county perspective, on maybe working with them to see if they wanted to pursue that. It kind of got shelved temporarily just because the people that we were talking to at Stout were extremely busy, but maybe we can bring that back to the surface again and see if that's something we could do to help develop that toolkit.
Sean, I saw you move, you want to comment?
Oh, we have tax incremental funding for bringing businesses.
Mhm.
And like I said, we can't bring businesses, so we just work, can't have workforce if we have help. Why can't we do the same thing for housing?
So we do have tax incremental financing for housing developments. We have two in the city right now, Eco Terrace and Estover. And so part of it is trying to be able to find developers that want to come on in. And the other part of it is too, and this kind of gets to the conversation with the Realtors Association is that we really brush up against the not in my backyard problem. And then sometimes it requires us to do rezoning. And then I think this is just the human nature that when you have the public hearings for changing the zoning, you'll get a lot of the neighborhoods come out and they're not happy. And then they're influencing the decision makers, the policy makers on, they're feeling like, oh, this is a lot of people here in this room saying they don't want it. I was elected to represent people and they're feeling that they got to vote it down. And then that makes it difficult, but which I'm kind of getting a little bit off topic, but yes, we do have incremental financing to put in utilities, roadways, and that's what we're doing right now for Estover.
You have to, the city, we don't have it for the county.
No.
Yeah, correct. So, I understand that that's more educational. Sure. Listen. We need the condos. We need the HOA type scenarios for both our elderly and for the young people, and the people who just don't have the ability to have them because of the war and the. So we gotta look at that and maybe setting up some type of taxable book for 20 years. I know it's painful, but.
There are some development agreements that can go into place for affordable housing that locks in rental costs and whatnot. We have a couple developments that are getting to be, I think, 20 or 25 years old, and then they're going to be exceeding outside of that cap. And so then those property owners are going to be able to now elevate their leases if they want to, or their rent if they want to, and we're hoping they do not. But
What are the chances?
yeah, I think it'll go up, but yeah, there are kind of ways, but there's still the challenges to it. And I think in the city has that advantage with those tax incremental financing development agreements that we can put in place that can help.
There are some sorry. The bills that passed the legislature this spring, one of them provides loans for infrastructure development, one of them to do commercial to residential conversion. I mean, there's some money out there that would aid that.
I think
Go ahead, Paula. No, Paula, and then we'll go to Christina.
I think in awareness of needs or reducing stigma area, we've done some great work of advertising, like with the Building Hope. There was social media or video that was done. I think we can do some work on that to be able to help Dunn County really take a look and build some seeds of what does community building look like? What do we need to do that? And so I would like to see that as one of the areas, if we can look for, maybe there's a grant that we can get to do a video or do different things that would be building that community, laying those seeds moving forward.
I had a thought about that, but I'm gonna defer to Christina for her thoughts.
Our organization is really set in a way that he's doing the research and getting information from developers. That's a partnership that we can really help get that information, survey, give that would be something that we could bring to the table and help with that research piece and work on what exactly we want to know and get that information together. So that's something.
Perfect. So I had a couple of thoughts. So I'm going to hold my thoughts for a second. I want to say, so part of the challenge of this is that we all have lives. We all have work lives and, well, not you retired folks, you guys don't have lives, but, you just sit around eating bonbons and watch. We all have lives. and their busy lives. And by the fact that you're sitting here, it's indicative of the fact of how, you know, of your commitment to your community and to making this, you know, the best place that it can be. And so, so part of it is great ideas and how do we move forward in a, you know, somewhat expedient fashion, given that we all have lives. So, I would just like to talk about like practically, so we're gonna have to split up some work in order to you know, in order for this to be able to be possible. Do we split into 2 or 3 kind of smaller work groups out of this group that could meet and just talk about between now and next time about how to, you know, and I would invite, you know, our partners. I can certainly reach out to Stout. There's been some interest actually already. So, but I would invite, you know, our partners that are here at the table, and we could loop them in. But if we basically set up kind of I'm just, again, very loosely, and I'd leave it to the smaller group to come back to talk about, or to come back with sort of a recommendation about next steps. But the toolkit idea, the kind of audit / builders idea, and then the advocacy and changing oh, somebody said it really, really well.
Changing perception or telling the
Yes,
story?
no. Oh, Jude, there was something, I even wrote it down, but I don't know where it went, but it was a great, yeah. There was a great phrase that somebody used, but anyway, so along those lines. So, and I would say that from a county perspective, in terms of Paula's idea about a video or whatever, you know, we do have some internal resource to do that as well, with Krista, and at least for the starting message part of it, to be able to put together hey, we met and this is what we'd like to do. The other thing that we could fairly easily do, and I don't know, so tell me what you think about this in terms of its value, but it would be super easy to pull off. I thought about, so we in conjunction with the city have access to a product called Qualtrics, which is able to do some polling and some data crunching, kind of pulling together for us. I thought about maybe via, again, but we could do a press release on it. We could do social media, and provide opportunity as to where people could go out and find it, and maybe do some polling on just community recommendations. Sort of, yeah, I know you get everything from soup to nuts, but if we want to let the community know that we're actually doing something, then let's ask them for their feedback. Tell us your stories, tell us what you want us to know. And because we can, I don't know. So tell me your thoughts about it. I'm all about engagement, so.
I'm all for it. And I, as you were talking about that too, not just the community, but I was thinking again, like with the Realtor Association, the builders, where they're saying they're running these challenges, that Qualtrics survey may be something to push out where they could do it. And I think too, and I say it in the sense of anonymously as well, because I also want to be mindful that if I'm a developer and I'm putting in criticisms of it, and then I come in a month later and I'm trying to negotiate a finance package, like for tax increment financing, they may not want to share their information
Sure,
with
so they
us,
could do it.
fear that we would go, you know, you were talking smart about us the other day, and no, we're not going to give you that deal. And so, I mean, maybe that for some of those areas that we're falling short, where we're talking about maybe it's zoning codes or whatever on our audit piece, and I'm glad you brought it up because I wasn't even thinking Qualtrics. So that's just amazing suggestion. So I'm all for utilizing that platform to try to help gather information for us.
I would just say on that, you know, to put forward that the county is moving forward with some things. So to right up front, it's a survey that just doesn't say we're thinking about it or whatever, but that we're moving forward. And then if you had particular areas that you wanted people to respond to instead of just a blank slate. And to really say, these are the things that we're looking at, or, you know, and then have some room for comment on that. But I, you know, to really do something that is more directive rather than just a real general, you know, throw.
So we could take our kind of identified target areas and then hone in on some questions around that.
Right.
And before we ever did that, I mean, I would say part of maybe the advocacy group, whoever that ends up being, could just tackle if they want to do that, and then come back and kind of share some ideas around what that polling might look like with the community.
Chris, if I may, this comes from, 40 years of doing survey research. If a survey were just sort of generally, what would you like us to do? We would be overwhelmed with disparate feedback and it wouldn't be at all useful. Eric is completely right that I think this is a vehicle that would be really helpful and useful with employers, with developers, builders, et cetera, because we could definitely target the information that we're seeking, the specific set of needs. But if it's just for general, I mean, even for awareness purposes, I mean, there's a danger in asking people for input.
You're not
if-
using it.
If we don't appear to be using it. So that's just a sort of general survey caution.
Absolutely.
Target it and make it work.
Well,
Housing is one of the issues on the CHIP, the
Yeah.
community health assessment that's going on right now as
Sure.
well.
That's true. That's true. All right. So in the last 15 minutes, can we just talk about where you each might like to land with regard to these 3 areas of focus? And then we'll finish up with kind of a task to get together and then talk about when does this group come back together that allows time for a smaller group. Because the other thing that I am always conscious of is the number of meetings that we ask people to and the time commitment. And Bob and I had a really good conversation about just all the things that fall on everyone's plate. And so want to be conscious of that. So I have a toolkit group. And I have I'm just going to write it an audit group because I don't know what else to call that at this point in time, and an advocacy group. And we can think about your first task to your group could be to find it a name. But Bob.
I would like to volunteer for that toolkit group because I would find that to be very useful for myself and probably other town chairmen.
Awesome.
I'd like to toolkit as well.
That's
You were-
where I'd like to jump in if I could.
All right.
I think I have to be in this
I
one.
think you have to be in that one, yes.
That's why we wanted to be in it on that group. We knew you'd be there to help, or we're thinking it.
Is the auditing group, is that like looking at zoning? Is that? what
Yeah,
you're
looking
thinking?
at that, performing a code audit and talk, and that kind of that pulling figuring out how we're gonna access the developers and all that sort of stuff.
I'd volunteer for that one.
Me too.
That sounds like what we're gonna be talking about here. But I think I'll probably be my eyeballs on that anyway. I wonder about advocacy, maybe if there's anybody else that's interested.
Yep, Paula said she would do that. Sorry.
I would also probably I think the housing action team that I'm sort of bridging those 2 groups would be more likely on the advocacy. And although all the things that you mentioned have come up in the housing action team over the last few years, all of them.
Sure.
And we just haven't had the professional strength that there is in this room, the backgrounds that you guys have to tackle them. Interestingly enough, we have an architect now that has joined our group, and she's great at, she actually read those laws, Diane, that you were talking about, and understood them and helped explain them to us, and has also been trying to figure out some of the issues that are involved in safety, because that is one of our goals on the housing action team. is safe housing as well. And we certainly have heard some pretty scary stories about stairs falling in, lack of fire escapes, mold, other things that really impact us. So I feel like the advocacy piece would be natural. I'll work with Paula on that and Tom.
I'm gonna ask you guys, do any of you want to be a part of any of these things or at releasing notification? You pick. Audit has 3 and toolkit has 4. Okay, so we got Christina and Sean. Okay. And Carly. All right, everybody got a spot that wants a spot?
I think I would have to be in the audit as well.
Did you?
Audit
Oh.
and toolkit for me, I think.
Oh, I added you to that. Yeah, to
Oh.
them. Okay. Well, we can talk about that because maybe I can slip into one side of it too. Okay, so let's talk about Eric.
Can I ask 2 questions real fast? Is it all right for the audit group to take a look at the city codes too as well? Is that
Absolutely. I
okay?
think they should, yeah. If
That'd
you're
be great.
willing to do that, I think let's not do this twice.
Yeah,
And the towns, pull in what pieces of the townships that we need to as well.
I think we need to look at all the municipalities in Dunn County for sure.
All right, well,
There's a
thank you.
lot, but
And then the other one, and maybe this is a silly question, for the subgroups, I have a couple staff members too that would be helpful in developing toolkit and maybe even the audit group too as well. Does anybody have any problems if I bring people to the subgroups to help? Okay, all right, thank you.
Good. And it's more
Yeah, well, I just want to be sure I don't want to encroach on and step out of line. Thank you.
All right, time frame for, okay, so we should identify from each of those groups a convener. Someone who will, and I'll make sure that we follow up, Anna and I follow up with getting you out some minutes as well as sort of the takeaways or the action items from this meeting. But can I have a convener for the toolkit that would just be the person that would pull the group together? I got Bob, Steve, Eric, and Carly.
I nominate one of these 2. Based on their work duties.
yeah,
I'll
I-
second that.
yes. I feel like that's a natural
Okay.
conclusion.
And then in audit, I have Rob, Diane, Christina, Sean, Anne, me, maybe. Okay. And then on advocacy, Paula, Tom, and Louisa. Do you know two? Okay, so time frame for when you would be able to pull your groups together with people's busy lives, and then so that we can plan between now and when we meet again, how much time do you need?
We should meet in 4 to 6 weeks. That would be
Like the week after Labor Day, give us what, 4 weeks?
Mhm.
Is there a specific date you're looking at?
Yeah, I think if, as long as everyone's here and we can plan that, yeah, they would be very helpful in terms of planning to think about what that might look like.
So the first week of September is what we're looking at.
First or second week? Mm-hmm.
First is only
Yeah, it's one day.
Friday and Saturday.
Yes.
I like that Wednesday for my calendar, 6th.
The 6th.
How about you, gentlemen?
That actually works really well for me.
Early afternoon or later morning?
I'd vote for later morning.
I vote for not 8 AM, but anything else.
It would be Wednesday the 6th.
We're talking, Eric, you're talking about this group?
I was thinking the subgroup.
Oh, the subgroup. Oh, okay.
Oh, I thought we were talking about this group,
This
actually.
group, like, so that the subgroup would meet now and between the next meeting. So,
In early September.
Yeah.
But we still could be the sixth morning
Before 10 or before 11.
before 11. Yep, we have a meeting at 11.
Can we do 10? I got a 9 to 10 that's standing,
10 o'clock,
if possible.
10 to 11 on Wednesday, September 6th. This is this whole group. And then I'll make sure that there's a full contact list and up-to-date emails and stuff out to the conveners so that you can coordinate with, unless you want to do that now, you're I mean, you got 7 minutes. So if you'd like to figure out when Diane and Paula, if you want to pull your groups together and just figure out what would work, you can do that right now if you'd like to, or you can contact them at a later date. Okay, I'm gonna officially adjourn the meeting and stop the recording.